Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to give everybody a chance to get into the meeting and then we will get started. All right, it is noon, so I'm going to go ahead for the sake of time and get started. My name is Carrie Potter. I am an educational support coach with Family Matters. And so I want to thank you for joining us this afternoon over your lunch hour. And again, my name is Carrie. As I said, I'm an educational support coach with Family Matters. And the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act mandates that each state have at least one parent center, parent training information center to inform parents of their rights and responsibilities related to the education of children who need specialized instruction or accommodations at school. So Family Matters is one of the two parent centers in Illinois. We serve 94 counties in the state, and then the Family Resource Center and Disabilities is the other parent center in Illinois, and they serve Cook, Will, Grundy, Kendall, DuPage, Kane, Lake, and McHenry counties. So if you reside in one of those counties and need individualized assistance or want to participate in some live trainings, you could contact FRCD and ask for assistance or ask about services that they provide. All parent training information centers across the nation are funded by the U.S. Department of Education, Office of Special Education Programs. I do want to say that Family Matters is not a legal services agency, so we do not provide any form of legal advice or service. So any information from any presentations or today should not be taken as such. You will see in the chat, I'll put in a link to Amanda's slides and an activity handout. And so for sake of time, I want to go ahead and thank you, Amanda, for presenting today, and I will turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right, I'm going to bring up my slides for everybody. Hopefully you can see that okay. Well, welcome everyone. I am Amanda Kahn. I am an AAC collaborator, trainer, and coach for Infinitec. I'm an SLP by background, and I got into this field specifically so I could work with AAC. That's short for Augmentative and Alternative Communication. I've had the opportunity to work in the schools and the clinic settings, and through those, I was able to do a lot of service providing out in the community, as well as in homes with families. So today we're going to be discussing AAC implementation strategies with a focus on the classroom. But please note this is a very flexible training, so please stop me at any point with questions. So before we get started, I'd love to know who I am speaking to. So if you could just pop in the chat what your role is. Are you a parent to an AAC user? Are you a teacher, an SLP, a parapro? If you could just pop in the chat what your role is, that'd be great so I can just have an idea of who I'm talking with. Parent and family navigator. Ooh, I love it. Okay. Okay, so it looks like we've got a decent amount of parents, which is great. Okay, awesome. Director of Special Ed, I love it. Okay, so we've got a pretty good variety. We've got some advocates on here. Okay, so pretty good blend, a social worker, I love it. Okay, this is a really good blend of people. All right, so if I do any sort of terminology that does not make sense to you, please pop in the chat, ask a question. I'm going to do my best not to use a lot of terminology, or if I do, explain it. But sometimes I do get caught up, so please stop me if I do. All right, so today we are going to be talking about modeling and what it is, why it's important. We're going to go over what's called a s'mores model, which is really going to tell us how we can go about modeling. We're going to talk about a prompting hierarchy. I'm not going to go super in detail into this, but just want to give you an idea of what that can look like and when and why we would use a prompting hierarchy. And then we'll talk about some explicit instruction. Hopefully we're going to get to core vocabulary and descriptive teaching, but I do usually do this training in about an hour and a half to 2 hours. So we're going to kind of see how we're doing on time, but you do have access to the slides. So if we do miss it, please forgive me. So the first point I would like to make to all of you is that there is absolutely no prerequisites to use AAC. There are no cognitive prerequisites. The students do not need to present with a specific percentage of speech or language delay prior to introducing AAC. A student does not need to identify all the pictures on an AAC system before being introduced to it. So keep that in mind. There are no prerequisites. We can be presenting this to any kiddo at any time as a tool for them. This visual comes from Speak for Yourself. For many of our AAC users, We're starting with exposure down here at this bottom layer of the cake. Where they're learning how to tolerate having us use the AAC system in their presence, but they might not appear to pay attention to it. Please know that this is okay, and it's a great place to start if that's where you're at. We can grow from here. So you saw on the last slide there that AAC modeling layers. We're going to talk now about modeling, what it is and why it's important for us to model. So modeling goes by many different names. I'm not really sure what it is about the speech therapy world. We love to have names for the same thing, different names for the same thing. I'm a speech therapist. I'm a speech language pathologist. I'm an SLP. It's all the same thing. And here we have another example of this. We've got our aided language stimulation, our partner augmented input. These are different names, and depending on who's providing the modeling, that's kind of where you use some of these different terms, but essentially they all mean the same thing. So if you hear any of these terms, this is what we're referring to, is this AAC modeling. And you're primarily going to hear me use AAC modeling or partner augmented input. AAC modeling is an evidence-based communication strategy for people who use AAC. It requires the communication partners, such as the staff, parents, peers, to model language by pointing to symbols or pictures on the person's communication board or device while also talking, gesturing, or signing. The purpose of providing partner augmented input is to teach an AAC user the language of the communication system by immersing that user in the language across activities and environments. So here's a really nice visual for this. For typically developing kids, we provide about 1 year of input before we expect any output. We provide this input within the context, and there are multiple models. Children learn language by hearing and participating in it. For our students who are nonverbal, we need to provide input using their AAC system so they can first understand it and then be able to use it expressively. This is kind of a gold standard video. You're going to see I have several links to videos throughout this presentation. We are going to watch precisely none of them, I'm sorry to say. But I wanted to include them in here today because these are great resources. So if you're not quite understanding a concept, or if you need to review it, or if you're trying to help a spouse or maybe a grandparent or a family or a new staff member, so if you're trying to help train them on some of these concepts, this is a great place to go, and you'll see these throughout the presentation as a great resource for you. Okay, this is the first one. So some of you are likely familiar with this concept of AAC modeling. It's been around for a while. So a lot of speech therapists and teachers, special educators, they know the importance of modeling if they've been in the field for a little while. But the reason we're going to focus on here so much today is to emphasize the need that everyone needs to model. And this is why. Jane Corson points out that the average 18-month-old child has been exposed to 4,380 hours of oral language at a rate of 8 hours per day from birth until 18 months old. A child who has a communication system and receives speech language therapy 2 times per week for 20 to 30-minute sessions will reach that same amount of language exposure in 84 years. Yeah, let that sink in. Our teachers and our SLPs need to know how to model, absolutely. But so do our paraprofessionals, our related service providers, our parents, our siblings, our peers. So I'm really excited, genuinely excited that we have such a diverse group of people, because yes, our teachers and our SLPs need to know it, but you guys need to know this as well. Everyone needs to be modeling, because we don't want our AAC users finally figuring out how to use their device when they're 84 years old. I love this quote by David Buchelman. He says, "Giving an AAC user a communication system no more makes them a communicator than giving me a piano makes me a pianist. It is merely a tool." Okay. So let's think about how our naturally developing language learners learn language. When our babies learn spoken language, they learn by hearing it all day long. Parents do not label or expect their children to identify an object from a field of 2 choices before the parent uses the word in a sentence. That's just not what we do. Certainly, you know, when I have a 5-year-old and 8-year-old now, and when I was at the grocery store when they were babies, I'm talking to them the whole time, right? Talking to them about what I've got on my list, what we need to look for next. Let's go find the apples. Oh, which ones should we buy? And I'm providing this, and wouldn't it have been shocking if my 6-month-old baby responded and told me which apple to purchase, right? That would be creepy. So really what we're looking at here is providing this input without expectation. And this is a key takeaway phrase for you, is modeling without expectation. We do this with our kiddos when they are typically developing, and we need to do this with our AAC users as well. Okay, another resource for you. This video explains why we need to model without expectation, and it gives several examples of what that can look like. I do particularly like this one for parents because it does give some nice examples of in the home. All right, so I'm going to go back to, again, that typical language development. We learn another language if we're trying to pick up a second language, like I'm trying to learn Spanish, for instance. We learn that by listening to the teacher speak that language. And we listen to that language throughout the class and within the context of the lessons. So keep in mind that receptive language, that understanding of words and language, always precedes expressive language. Expressive language is the words that we are communicating. So once we begin to understand Spanish, we can then start to speak it. The same applies to our AAC users. Once they understand their device, they can then use it expressively to communicate. So, would your Spanish teacher ever expect you to speak French when she's speaking to you in Spanish? Of course not. It's an unfair ask. But unfortunately, we do this to our AAC users a lot and all too frequently. Okay, we're going to do a little pop quiz. Don't be afraid to get this wrong. It's okay. What symbol is this? Go ahead and pop it in the chat. What do you think this symbol represents? Anyone? Shapes. Sure. It's a good guess. Anybody else? An oval and a parallelogram. Yep. Yep. Shapes. Yep. Two different shapes, but you can fit them inside of each other. Love it. Okay. So remember, this is a symbol. So this is going to be a representation of something that we want to communicate. So this is actually a PCS board maker symbol, and it is to represent different. That is the concept for this one. Different. Okay. I'm going to give you another one. It's a little bit more abstract. Bear with me. I'm going here with this. Okay. Take another guess. What do you think this symbol could represent? In. Sure. Looks like the arrow is pointing in. Go in. Yep. Enter. Yes. All good guesses. Door. Sure. Okay, so for this particular symbol set, it's to represent middle. Okay. The point of this is not actually, did you get it right or wrong? Really, the point of what I want to show you this is a lot of times we get hung up on symbol sets and images. And really the reality of all of this is, now that you've heard what it means, because you have a solid grasp of the English language and you understand the words that I'm communicating to you, you'll be able to likely remember this the next time I show it to you. The more repetition and the more times that I show you this symbol that kind of looks like a door or in or whatever, and I tell you middle, go sit in the middle between your friends, put this pencil in the middle of your desk, and I'm using this throughout the day, you're going to get this concept because of the repetition of it. So just something to keep in mind as we're going through this. Don't get too hung up on the images. Okay. So modeling. Why do we model language? There's benefits to both AAC user as well as for us as a facilitator. For AAC user, it's going to help us to teach our learner the vocabulary in their second language. So if I have any SLPs on this meeting, it's the semantics or the content. It can help these students to see how the language goes together. So that's kind of your grammar. It helps us to see the function of language in the context, so how it's used across many different activities and environments. It makes a statement that AAC is acceptable mode of communication. So if we're modeling, they're not the only ones using it. It makes it more socially acceptable. And that's a really, really big one for a lot of our AAC users to get buy-in. It's also a visual representation that helps kids with processing language. And I cannot emphasize this point enough. As a speech therapist, I have seen this, and it's not just me, the countless speech therapists that I have spoken to, the benefit of providing an AAC system to a student, the number of times that I see their receptive language skyrocket because they now understand the language, because it's now visual. It's not just all auditory and very fleeting information. It's much more static. They can see it, they can process it, they have more time. And that is really critical for a lot of the kiddos that I work with. It's also going to reinforce literacy, and that's such a I mean, literacy is so powerful. We all know that the benefits of literacy, but that's just, it is going to help support that. It's also going to help us as the facilitator to model, because we become more familiar with the system. It forces us to slow our rate of speech down, which again, a lot of our AAC users really benefit from that slower rate of speech for that processing time. We use shorter sentences, which are easier to process. It helps us to emphasize keywords and ideas. It helps us see what language is needed on a system. Often when I'm modeling, that's when I'm realizing, oh, you just had a birthday and I need to update that. Or I'm finding that there is a word that's not missing that is really critical to put on there. And it also encourages staff to repeatedly use core words. And we're going to talk about core words in a little bit here. Okay, some more resources for you, specifically on modeling. This is a great one that reinforces the need to presume competence and model. Without the labels, many of us would not be able to identify the symbols. So it's just another friendly reminder for that. And these are just some more great resources for you guys. Really, the takeaway from this is, if you use the talker, the student will learn how to use their talker. So make sure you're making it fun, reduce demands, and create opportunities. So I'm going to pause here. Questions so far? Okay, any point, pop a question in the chat, pause, and I will be happy to stop. Otherwise, I'm just going to keep rolling through unless you guys stop me. Okay, Carrie, you seeing anything?
I am not.
Okay, then I'm just going to keep rolling. Here we go, guys. Stay with me. All right, so now we're going to talk about how to model. We know why it's important. But what exactly are we supposed to? Oh,
Is
yeah.
something in the Q&A. Okay. So it says, how have you gotten the buy-in from teachers?
Buy-in from teachers. Oh, that's a good question. I think a lot of it is showing them the research that is there for the power of mind. There's a lot of research that supports the use of modeling. So if you go back to, let me scroll back up for you. Hold on one second. So this article right here kind of talks about what AAC modeling is, and just really educating them on what this is and why it's so important. Even taking the time to have them watch a video or two and talking about what it is and why it's so important. Kind of sharing some of the information that exactly what I'm talking about. This is the kind of information that I am sharing with teachers, that they understand why it's so important, why I don't want them learning it at 84 years of age. Okay, so taking the information that I am sharing with you so far, that's exactly what I'm sharing with my teachers. Okay. Okay, let's dive into how to model. Step one, make sure the AAC is going wherever your AAC user is going. Okay, we cannot model if it's not there. So it's a really critical piece for this. So we can get creative about this, and keeping in mind that, if I have an iPad, for example, obviously it's not going in the swimming pool with me, unless you have one of those super duper great waterproof cases. So there's certainly going to be times where we might have to come up with like a backup communication or some, low tech options or the like. But we want to get kind of creative about placement for this. So we want to have some reminders set around, especially if this is something that's kind of new to you. You can put this by doors, put this by backpacks, put this by desks. Just so you have these visual reminders of, do I have my AAC system? So a lot of times with my teams, my recommendation for like the first week that you're working with this system, I don't even care if you model. Frankly, your first step is to make sure that AAC system is with you. Job number one. That's the only focus for week number one, is making sure that AAC system is with that student. Making sure that if they're going to the bathroom, there's a hook for them to hang it up on so that it's not laying on the nasty floor. Making sure that when they go out to the playground, there's a place, by the swing set. Maybe it's like a basket or something like this that's zip tied to the post that's, it has the swings on it, so that way they can have both hands available to be able to get on that swing. I want hooks. I want straps. Do we need a strap so that they can independently carry it themselves? Do we need a mount on a wheelchair? What do we need to make sure that this device is with them at all times? So that's
We do have
number one, making sure it's available.
we do have a couple more questions,
Yeah,
Amanda.
by all means.
So the first one in the Q&A says, thank you. Can you put resources in the chat or email them out at the end? I'd be happy to send an email out
Yeah, it's
this week with resources.
okay. Do you have specific resources that you're looking for? Because I have folders upon folders of resources. So let me know if there's something specific you're looking for.
And then we have, what about motivation for parents for the IEP team? What do you think about homework for parents?
Homework for parents, I take on a case by case basis. So if there is a family, there are some families that kind of need that structure, in which case I'm happy to provide some homework for you. There's so many great resources out there. And when we get to the core section, you'll see there's a whole bunch of resources specifically for core. And I think that's a great place for families to start. And a lot of them have some worksheets that specifically can go to home. That'll be like, we're working on the word go. And it'll give them a whole list of different activities that they can be doing at home. Having said that, it's not for all of my families. There are some families where they are surviving minute by minute, hour by hour. And so for me to put any more demands on them, it's just not realistic. And so what we try to focus on is like, hey, is there 5 minutes of time that you can start with that feels reasonable to you? Is it at mealtime? Is it when you're reading a book at night? Is it choosing a shirt in the morning? So sometimes we just need to start very realistic expectations because, hey, you have a tremendous amount on your plate. So I think the real critical piece there is you need to meet your families where they're at and find out where they are, what their needs are. Are they in a place to want homework or no? And I'm willing to provide that if they are. And if they're not, hey, respect. And I will meet you where you're at. There's some kiddos I work with, they are so exhausted after a day of school, they will come home and pretty much sleep the rest of the day. So, we might just be working in communication on the weekends. So, we really have to be flexible and respectful of that, I think. Any other questions?
The resources requested were for teachers, wants to provide to teachers. There is another question on how to get away from a bias that AAC or AT is for individuals who are nonverbal only.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, so let me tell you a little story about definitely not nonverbal only. I'm gonna make a note. See, I'm in the world of if it's written down, it exists. Okay, so we need resources specifically for teachers on modeling. Okay. Okay, so little story on it's definitely not just nonverbal only. And ASHA has a position statement on that as well. So this isn't my opinion. But just to give you kind of a more extreme example, I actually, when I worked out in Seattle for a while, and one of the gentlemen I worked with, he was in his 30s, and he came to me because he wanted to work on his articulation. He was very motivated to do that, and that was great. Absolutely, we can do that. But what we were finding after working with him for several weeks is he was reporting there were 2 instances, really, that he was struggling to communicate. And it was when he was going to, for instance, the doctors, and he needed to provide specific information about himself, his name, his address, his phone number. They could not understand him. Okay. Now, does this man need a full-on AAC system? No, no. We were able to solve it by creating a business card, and he was able to utilize that at the doctor's office. The other instance that was a real challenge for him was on the phone, again, when he was providing specific information. So when he was trying to order a pizza and had to give his address, they could understand him well enough to know what kind of pizza he wanted because they had context for that, but they could not figure out the address. So for instances like that, we had a Go Talk, one of those old school Go Talk, I think it was 20 plus, mid-tech device, and his brother recorded his voice with the specific information, not only so he could order a pizza, but also so in an emergency type situation, he could inform 911 of what he needed. Now, this gentleman did actually have the funds to be able to purchase this himself, but I will tell you, I would have gone to medical insurance for that because that is a medical necessity. Okay, but that's a more extreme example because 98, 99% of the time, people could understand him because he was really good about using all these communication breakdown strategies. He could use synonyms. He could describe to you. He could really repair and tell you, I'm asking you a question. He could do all these strategies. He had great gestures. And that was one of the things he just really struggled with. And his handwriting was not great, so you couldn't just write it down. So these are just in a more extreme example. But I've also worked with kiddos where, maybe they're called part-time AAC users is really what you're referencing. There's a whole bunch of AAC users out there that are now talking about this. Hillary Zesk is one of them. She's come out about, she actually presents a number of times. And there are still times where she utilizes her AAC device. So for the most part, she's able to rely on her speech, but there are times where, maybe anxiety or whatever really increases and she's just not able to use her speech. So she has an AAC system as a backup. And so that's your part-time AAC user. And that is absolutely an acceptable time to use AAC. You do not have to be nonverbal. Okay. Any other questions?
It looks like there's a comment on college students, I think, using AAC devices to ask questions in class or discussion. I think that's more of a statement maybe than a question. And then somebody says, I have a friend who had a stroke several years ago, and while she is verbal, her number sense ability was deeply affected. When she goes to her medical appointment, she has written down her birthday, address, and phone number to share. However, sometimes people want her to be able to orally explain any suggestions.
Yep. Great question. And Shelley, that is a very specific question. I will love to talk to you about that. So stay on when we are done, and I will absolutely love to discuss it with you further. Okay. All right.
Oh, and Athene was saying it was a question about college and class discussion.
Okay, college students. Oh, so college students ask questions in class or discussion. Yes, absolutely. I mean, if they have a hard time using their verbal speech, why can't we offer an alternate? The thing is, we all use multiple modes of communication, right? All of us do. I use texting, I use emailing, use my gestures, you've noticed. People use sign language. It's multimodal. We all do it, right? So some reason there's like this judgment of now if you're using something techie, is that okay? Yes. Yes, because communication is the most important thing, right? It's something it's innate to who we are as humans. Um, so yeah, I did we did it should be considered. Okay, I'm gonna keep going because we got a lot more information to crank out, but if you do have more questions, please stop me. Okay, we're going to jump into this model called s'mores. S'mores is really going to help us understand how we are going to model. Now that we have our AAC where it needs to be, it's with us. We can move and groove with it. We're going to start on with s'mores. So s'mores is an acronym that was developed by Jill Center and Matt Bod. They're both out of Naperville area, and it helps us to remember how we can model AAC. So it's going to start with a slow rate. So we speak slowly and insert pauses into the conversation. This just kind of naturally happens because AAC by its nature is slow. Embrace it. It is okay because remember, this is going to be helping to increase the processing for a lot of our students. So don't shy away from that. Then we're going to model. We're going to point to the buttons and pictures while we're talking about what you are doing, what the student is doing, what other people are doing around the student. We're really going to be describing what's going on. We're modeling what is happening in the classroom and around the student. We'll model to other people nearby us. We can provide language that is centered around the child's attention and their preferences and their activities. We can focus on commenting and making statements. We can model mistakes. We are going to make mistakes when we are modeling, and I'm going to encourage you to embrace those mistakes and model how to fix it. Model, oh my goodness, the word that I want is not here, because that's going to happen to your AAC user. We're going to model repair patterns. Encourage other people to model. Maybe it's a peer, maybe it's another staff member. I wonder what you thought of that, and then give them the chance to respond. We really want to model a variety of different purposes. Go beyond your requests. We sometimes get stuck on requesting. I'm going to share a really quick story with you about this. Again, another a student I worked with out in Seattle came to me. He was 13 years old, severe autism, no communication system whatsoever. And we are talking some of the most aggressive behaviors I have ever seen in my career. And so this young man comes to me and I'm like, hey, we're modeling without expectation. That's just how we're rolling. So for 6 weeks, I did nothing but model without expectation. And on the 6th week, literally to the day, I was kind of pulling my hair out. Like I don't feel like I don't think I'm getting through to him. It's kind of what I was feeling. And so I was rummaging through my therapy office, just grabbing a whole bunch of different things that I wanted to try to see if I could get some sort of interaction or response from him. And so one of the things I grabbed out was a Ranger Rick magazine all about frogs. I will never forget it. Brought it to this gentleman. We sat down. I started reading it. And in the middle of the article, he reached over to the device, navigated to the opinions page, and said, I like it. The first message this young man ever communicates in his life is not a request. I like it. Find out this kid loves animals, loves them. And that is how we did therapy until we parted ways. So go beyond requests. There is so much more to communication than just requests. Okay, the other thing we want to do is we want to respect and reflect. So if your student gives you anything, you can, if they're verbally trying to give you something and you're not quite sure what they're saying, model it. If they point to something on the device and they say have or something kind of random, try to make it relevant. If you truly don't understand what they said, hey, be honest about it. I heard you say have. Really sorry, I'm not sure quite what you meant by that. Okay. When I'm doing therapy, you will often hear me say phrases like, I wonder if you're trying to say, I think maybe you are saying. So if you see a kiddo that's taken something and chucking it across the room, hey, let's model social appropriate communication of that. Looks like you're trying to tell me done. You are done. You want to stop. I want to stop. And you're modeling that on that communication system. Perhaps you are telling me. These are all the kinds of phrases I use all the time. And then we can repeat. So this is especially critical if we are teaching a concept. So like the core vocabulary that we're going to be talking about in just a few minutes here, you're going to be saying it again and again and again. Each time you hear that key phrase that you're trying to teach them, model it, because the more we're modeling it across activities, across environments, the more apt they are to learn it. And then expand. So this is fancy words, guys. Recast what and expand on what we said. Let me tell you what this really is. This is where we are going to be taking whatever message they have, and we will either put it in the correct order and or we will make it a little bit longer. We do this all the time with our little bitty kiddos. I promise you, you all know how to do this, okay? This is when we have a kiddo that's like, cookie, cookie, and you're like, oh, cookie, please, right? So we expand it. If we have a kiddo that's saying, home go, we can recast, we can change the word order, put it in the correct word order and say, yes, we are going home, okay? And then here is the hardest part. I coach on this probably more than anything else. Stop. Once you have provided a model, you need to give wait time. Be quiet. Allow the student to process information. Allow them to formulate and respond. If they don't respond, move on. It's okay. Your job is to create the opportunity, and you've done that by modeling and by stopping. And you're going to stop and wait for at least 10 to 15 seconds. That's what our research says. You're going to wait at least 10 to 15 seconds. Now that is, certainly can be adjusted depending on the student. There are some very complex kids I've worked with where you need to wait a solid minute because their bodies are just so complex. But for most of my AAC users, it's about 10 to 15 seconds that you're going to be giving that wait time. But it's so critical. I love this one by Cough Drop. They say, you tell me to listen, but you won't wait for me to say what I think. That's hypocritical. Okay, another resource for you guys. And this is why we model our thoughts, our feelings, our opinions, our questions. We want to show our AAC users how to communicate and connect with us using a method that is accessible to them. The goal is not to create an echo, but to hear an authentic voice. How powerful is that? More resources for you. There's a whole thing on that Matt Bod has done on s'mores, so if you want more information on that. Also, if any of you are members of Infinitec, if your districts are members of Infinitec, that means staff can access a whole online classroom. Families can access the same online classroom. And it's free. There's no additional charge. You sign up for a free account and voila. So there's a lot of people that are not aware that not only can staff access this, but families can too. So if your district is a member of Infinitec, you can access this. And I bring this up because Jill Center and Matt Bod have a 3-part series on s'mores on that online classroom. So, okay, in the interest of time, if we have time, I will come back to this, but I'm going to assign this in case we don't. One of my favorite activities is you have that core board. Okay. Love for you to be able to turn on your favorite song. I have Here Comes the Sun by the Beatles. I want you to jam out to it and listen to it and see how many times you can model on that core board. So have a marker, have a pen, whatever. Every time you model, you make a little dot on your paper, and I want you to visually see how many times in a matter of one single song you can model. Okay, again, if we get time to come back to this, I will, but I want to make sure we get through all the core information first. Okay, I'm going to pause. Questions before we move on to prompting hierarchy.
So there is a question on how does the district become a member of Infinitec?
So really there's forms that they have to fill out. there is a fee associated with it. But if that's a question, have the district, you can contact me. My email address is at the beginning of the slides, end of the slides, and I will put you into contact with the different, we're divided into what's called coalitions. But they will be assigned to a certain coalition, and then they, if they do the membership, then they can access all of those fun things. So there's also a lot of really great resources on IATP. That's another great resource. So keep that in mind. And there's also the YouTube video that Matt Baugh did on s'mores that is available to anybody. So help yourself to that. Shelley, it looks like you have your hand raised. You can go ahead and unmute if you want to say something.
Oh, okay, you should be able to unmute now. I allowed you to
Okay,
talk,
I was
so-
like, I just didn't know how to get in here. Okay, yeah, I'm really enjoying your presentation.
Okay.
I'm a parent liaison at CFC number 9.
Okay.
And we're having an upcoming meeting that, I wondered if you can't drop by, if you could supply us with some, some kind of materials for families whose children are turning 3 and going into the school system, so that they would have more, I guess, informative information about how they should proceed in the community.
Sure.
If you would like to drop by, it's on April the 15th. It's at the Austin Branch Library. I emailed it to the 2 emails that is in the contact, Megan Multi and Miss Watkins. So I put the flyer in that email. So if you get an opportunity, if you, if you're available, because
Okay.
we're trying to
Shelley,
stop in.
let's, if you can stay on after, and we can chat a little bit more about that. And
okay.
I'll take a look at my calendar and stuff. Okay.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yep, absolutely. All right. I don't see any other questions right now. So, hold on. Parents want an AT evaluation. What is best practice and responsibility who are not in a public school system? Okay, excellent question. Because they're not in public school, Dawn, I'm going to ask you, I'm going to have just a group of people staying on. I just don't want to keep a whole bunch of people waiting for like very specific questions. So Dawn, stay after, and I will try to help you answer that. It's not super simple, but we will get to it. Okay. And I do have a couple
hand raised.
questions on that. Oh yeah.
You want to hold that for the end? Okay. Theodora, you are able to unmute yourself.
My question is, and I think I heard you say something about insurance, but who is responsible for purchasing this equipment?
Oh, such a good question, and I'm so happy you answered. I'm going to my email.
And I'm an educational surrogate. I don't know if I mentioned that.
Yep,
Okay,
and that's
thank
quite
you.
right. So and regardless of who you are, it's gonna be the same answer. So I'm putting into the chat this lovely document. If you have not seen this, please read it. Came out at the end of January of this year, so it's pretty new. But I love it because it is 24 pages, but it's 24 pages of language that is very simple and direct. And it goes over some of the most commonly asked questions about AAC and as it to the school system. So look this over because this has a lot of great information, and one of them is specifically funding. The direct answer to that is the school is required to provide AAC if the student needs it. However, they are permitted to go through medical insurance as the primary funding source before they are required to purchase it. That is the short answer, but this is kind of where I'm getting my information is partly from this document. The other thing you can look at is the state of Illinois has a whole document on assistive technology, and there's a whole bunch of information there on funding as well. So look up that document as well. I don't have that. Well, maybe hold on. Maybe I do. Maybe I do. I do. Look at this. Illinois Assistive Technology Guidance Manual. Let me put that in the chat too. That's another great one. There you go. These are your two resources of where I'm getting this information from. Okay. Okay, let's keep going through. We got 15 minutes left. So let's talk about prompting hierarchy. Again, I'm not going to go super into detail into this, but I think it's really important to understand where we're coming from and thinking about why we're doing this and when we should be doing this. So when speech and language do not develop typically, we find different methods to teach communication, such as with AAC. There is a drive to help that non-speaking child. And in my experience, many people prompt without realizing they've ever done it. And this is why we encourage AAC teams to talk about prompting hierarchies and agree upon how to use prompts with an AAC user. Remember, when it comes to learning a do task, there's often a right or wrong answer. 2 + 2 is always 4. That's just how it is. But with communication, there is no right or wrong. And if we tell the student the right words to say, then we're feeding them their expressions and they're not communicating. They're following directions. In a description by Kathleen Post, if you're trying to elicit a certain response from a student, it's not communication, it's compliance. Similarly, Dr. Karen Erickson stated, if I'm prompting, I'm trying to get the kid to say what I expect them to say. And that's training, it's not teaching. So here's what you can do. You can encourage them to use their method of communication to communicate if you don't know what they're communicating. You can give them choices. You can show them either how to use a word or where to find the vocabulary if they're having a hard time locating it, but you cannot tell them what to communicate. Prompting hierarchies are designed as reminders of the type and frequency of a support a learner may need to succeed at a task after providing direct instruction. Prompting is not a standalone teaching method. Prior to expecting independent use, we are responsible for providing instruction. This may include modeling in context. It may include peer modeling, vocabulary practice, video modeling, scripting, and role-playing. This is a prompt hierarchy from Kate Ahern. And if you want to see that, if you can just Google prompt hierarchy and Kate Ahern, and this will pop up. But I want you to notice a couple of things on this particular prompt hierarchy. There are many out there. This is the one that I always recommend to my teams because there's a couple of things to note. At the very top, it says, use aided language stimulation. Well, we know that that's AAC modeling, right? So we're modeling. That's step one. Okay, we're going to create motivation. And then you're going to notice, I love this, there's weight between every single one of these prompts. Weight, until we get all the way down to the very bottom. So we've gone from create motivation to inviting or using an expectant pause, to using an indirect visual cue or a direct visual cue, an indirect verbal cue, a direct verbal cue, a non-directive model. And she explains all of these kind of in there. And then last but not least, look at the very bottom. It says increase motivation and re-expose to target vocabulary. Notice what is not on here. Hand over hand prompting. So if I see a team doing that, it's a huge red flag for me because I'm like, ooh, something's wrong here. Either we haven't modeled enough, we haven't instructed enough. But when we do hand over hand, that is taking away that person's autonomy, right? We're teaching them the right words rather than offering them the opportunity to actually communicate. It's a huge difference. Now, I do want to be clear, are there times where I will ever use hand over hand? Yes, but it's not while I'm communicating. An example of this is if I have a user where I've just moved their switch, let's say I've got a head user and they're using switches, and I just moved it, I might be like, hey, your switch, it's right over here. Okay, and let me help you find that. You feel that? Okay, that's where your switch is now. Let's give that a try. But I'm doing that before the communication opportunity begins. Okay. I have had a couple of very rare instances where I've had some individuals who have really severe motor planning challenges. And so again, I will teach them the motor plan, perhaps hand over hand, but then my hands are off when it comes to the communication. I do not use hand over hand because I'm taking away their autonomy. Okay, so there is more information in here on prompting hierarchy. I'm going to just kind of cruise through most of this, but just know that it is there. So if you're not clear on a specific type of prompt, go back through these and check them out. But just kind of keeping in mind, the first thing we have to do is make sure that they're motivated. I always say to my teams, communication needs to be rainbows and sunshine and unicorns. Like, this is great, motivating stuff. And so we want this to be fun. We want this to be all the wonderful, great things. Communication is not demonstrating knowledge. There's a huge difference. So especially when we're starting out with a new user, at no point are they demonstrating knowledge, or no point are they showing me because it's not fun. That is boring. I want this to be engaging and motivating. So that is the first thing I'm going to be doing. I might occasionally engage in some sabotage, but I'm going to use that very carefully and hopefully very honestly in order to increase motivation. I can also increase motivation through refusal and protesting. So many of our AAC users have gone through life as participants, not as directors. So they often respond instead of initiate. But there's a ton of power in telling someone what you don't like or what you don't want to do. And sometimes that can be the most motivating part for some of our students. So teaching students words like no and stop and I need a break can sometimes make a difference between participating and zoning out. Okay, these are some of your examples of some other prompts that you might want to use. I'm going to keep going so we get through some of the other information. Just kind of thinking about your questions in terms of creating opportunities. So if you're asking a question like, did you eat something today? That's a yes or a no question. It really is a very limiting in terms of the opportunity to respond versus, hey, what'd you have for lunch today? How was it? Asking those open-ended questions can just really help to open up that conversation and give that opportunity. You're creating that opportunity by offering that open-ended question. All right, and then at the end, we need to reassess the activity and increase motivation. So at the end of the day, if you have gone through and you have prompted, you've provided that instruction, you have gone through your prompting hierarchy and they still have not responded, guess what? It's okay. You move on. You did your job. You created that opportunity. Keep modeling, keep increasing the motivation, keep at it. I promise it'll pay off. All right. We're going to quickly go into explicit instruction because I told you guys we would talk some about core vocabulary. So core vocabulary, we can explicitly teach many different concepts, but really I'm going to be focusing more on core vocabulary. I'll try to briefly touch on descriptive teaching just so you know what it is. So core vocabulary are those really high frequency words, depending on who you're citing, it's anywhere between 200 to 400 words. These are words that we use across all languages on a daily basis throughout our day. So they're words like I, you, want, need, like, not, go, do, up, in. Okay, those are some of your core words. More. So one of the ideas is to explicitly teach these different core vocabulary words. And again, this also plays into literacy because if you actually look at a lot of the core words, there's a really big overlap between core words and sight words. So that's really cool. So absolutely play with that. And I love incorporating literacy into my therapy sessions, and this is one of the ways I do it. So you can pick a core word of the day, a week, a month, depending on your AAC user, wherever you're at. And you pick a whole bunch of materials that go with that word, bunch of different activities, books, all that kind of thing, and just immerse your students in this word. So So we model that word again across environments, across settings. And, I was asked about homework. This is the time when, if we're working on that word, the word want, I might send home a homework sheet and be like, hey, this is what we're working on. These are some examples of how you can work on it at home. And a lot of this work has already been done for you. So there's tons of resources out there on core words of the week. So please do not feel like you need to reinvent the wheel. This is just some of the ones that I have used, but if you Google and go to Teachers Pay Teachers, there is just tons of core vocabulary stuff out there. Just clicking through, it's a lot. So utilize these resources. All right, another great activity that I love to do is I will have my students pick a story. So it might be that's not a hippopotamus. And then what I do is I have a PowerPoint slide that I will give to my staff that I will put up for them so that they know what words to model. And I'll give specific directions for certain students. So like, let's say my student, Sarah, I'm really working, she's been heavily prompt dependent. And so we're trying to back off. So we're using a laser pointer to visually cue her. My friend Morgan, brand new to AAC. I don't want to overwhelm her. So we're only modeling the word not in this book. And so I'll give very clear instructions to my staff on what they can be doing. And so I love that strategy. Kelly Key was the one that came up with that little trick. So, okay, let's jump into descriptive teaching. One way that we may choose to provide explicit instruction is through this descriptive teaching. There comes a time when we need to analyze the vocabulary that is used in lessons and determine if the student may benefit from some light technology supports to demonstrate what they know in the classroom. So like maybe through worksheets or choice making or that kind of thing. We can also use a strategy called descriptive teaching. So descriptive teaching encourages students to use the words that they have in their AAC system, so their core words and their descriptive words, to talk about the words that they don't have. So in other words, if the vocabulary you're using in class is not in the AAC user system, do they really need it? How about the vocabulary for curriculum? If a class is learning about the human body, your student may need to know words like intestine, esophagus, rectum. But chances are your student may not be motivated to use those words in everyday conversation unless they're planning to become a doctor or something of that nature. So this is called temporary language. And our students use this type of language all the time in class, but not in conversation. So a good rule of thumb for this is, does my student show me with his other forms of communication any interest in wanting to say this word again? If not, do not put it in their vocabulary. Instead, provide low-tech supports to have them demonstrate the knowledge on the unit or use the descriptive vocabulary, the core words and the descriptive vocabulary. So this is an example by Gail Van Tatenhove on a science unit that one of her students was doing. So it kind of gives you, rather than having necessarily the word stiff on the device, student could do hard to move. Texture, rather than necessarily saying texture, they could have look or feel of something. There's several more examples of this in the videos that are on this slide here. And some more information for you. Now, this might all feel very overwhelming to all of you. So I want to leave you with the idea that you can create for yourself an action plan. So our goal is to be able to model for our student as a second language and to be fluent modeling in activities. So scripts and activity plans can help us scaffold our own abilities to do this. So when you're starting out, you may want to have an activity-based plan. So the one that's for like a specific activity, like maybe reading a book or listening to a song, or a core word or language-based plan. So this is for like a specific word that you're trying to target. So like the word want, and you're working on thinking about all the different environments and activities that you could work on the word want. Okay, so from there you can identify for an activity, which one you want to work on, do a task analysis, and then write a script of what that looks like, and then practice it. So this is an example of one. I'll let you look at that a little bit closer. You can also use, visual cue boards to help teach them how to describe things. So I'm going to tell you about the color. I'm going to tell you about how it feels like, all those kinds of things. Okay. All right. To conclude, using an AAC device is hard work, and generating a message can be slower on a communication system than it is for speaking students. As communication partners, it's our responsibility to build a positive communication environment. Teachers, family, and peers need to know that augmentative communication is messy and slow. The average person speaks 100 to 150 words per minute, while the average AAC user speaks 8 to 15 words per minute. It's a big difference. People need to learn to stop and to wait. They need to learn to not finish the AAC user's sentences unless they've been specifically asked to do so. Teach everyone that using an AAC device is hard work. Some therapists will encourage students to walk around with a light tech board for a day using it to interact. They can see how hard it is for themselves. So I've done it before. Certainly it's a great opportunity for parents to try, siblings, peers. Also, these AAC users might have mishits. They might speak out of turn. They might make an inappropriate comment, like making a farting noise. We need to handle this student the same way we would handle a verbal student who is making noises with their voice or using their hand under their armpit to make farting noises, okay? Taking the device away is never appropriate. I do love this resource. It's an oldie but a goodie. It's about how to create a positive communication environment. It's a really nice one to post in a classroom or when you're teaching people who are not familiar with it. And lastly, what are you assuming about your students? I want you to think about that, because our perception of a person and his abilities often drive what expectations we have of them. If we perceive that he will only be able to communicate by responding yes or no, this may be all that we ever expect from them. If we have low expectations, then we may only provide opportunities that support those expectations. But if we presume that our students are competent individuals, then we may provide more opportunities for them to shine. This is a great video by Gail Van Tatenhove, so when you get a chance, go ahead and watch it. And finally, I want you to think as you leave here, what is one thing that you can change or start doing differently tomorrow? Questions? Thank you, Maria. Appreciate that. I'm going to stay on. So if anybody even wants to unmute and just talk, that's okay too.
Oh, we have a hand raised. Dawn, I hit allow to talk, so you can unmute yourself now.
Hi, just a quick question. I was wondering if you have a resource for IEP goals specifically for accessing general education curriculum across all subjects. So the whole point of the IEP, so the child can make progress in general education curriculum and classroom. Thank you so much.
So that's a really good question. And Dawn, first of all, I love that you're asking that, because I think okay, so I've worked in outside of the state of Illinois. I've was trained actually out in Boston and worked out in Seattle. And I will be completely honest in saying it was a bit eye-opening for me when I came to the state of Illinois. It was like, why aren't we in general education? Because it is very different out where I was out in Seattle and in Boston. Just in terms of the frequency with which students are placed in general education. So it was a bit of a transition for me. So I'm really glad to hear that you're thinking about that, because I think there's so many AAC users that miss out on that opportunity. In terms of specific goals and objectives, I do not have a specific list, because really what I'm looking at is, what do they need to be successful? What is it I often, in terms of AAC objectives, I absolutely will look at like operational competence. So if we go to the 5, are you familiar with the 5 operational competent or the 5 competencies for AAC? So like operational, linguistic, are you familiar with those, Dawn?
No, no.
Okay. Okay, let me. Okay, hold on.
No, I was one of those parents that was told that AAC and HE devices are only for children who are nonverbal.
I'm sorry that you were told that.
That happens a lot in special ed, so it's not
Yep.
rare. That's probably
Yep.
why the Department of Education came out with that guidance, right? Because
Correct.
AT evaluations are not happening
Correct.
for faith.
And there is a lot of misinformation. I mean, and it's happening to this day. So I was presenting at the Illinois State Speech and Hearing Association. I'm going to say January, I don't know, some month this year. And a room full of speech therapists, full. And this exact topic was brought up in terms of, I actually did kind of like a little poll, like, what percentage of impairment do you need with your speech in order to qualify for AAC? And I, broke it down like 75 to 100, 50 to 75. And I broke it down. It was astounding the number of speech therapists that raised their hands for 0 to 25, 25 to 50. And the answer is none of the above. You require no impairment, like 99% is the required impairment. Like that is, if there is 1% of the time when you are not able to communicate using your speech and you require assistance with that, then let's give you that little tool for that. But to this, and that was this year that I did that. So I mean, so at least I was able to educate all those individuals in that room. Yay. But it is definitely something that is continuing to be needed. Okay, let's get back to I'm getting passionate about all this, but let's get back to your topic. So specific goals or objectives for general education. I think it really comes down to looking at the competencies that you want for your student. So are we looking at, I'm more inclined to write a AAC specific goal or objective if we're talking about like operational competency, like does the student need to be able to, plug their device in? Is that something that they're physically able to do? If so, I want them doing it. I want them taking control and as much ownership of that as possible. Are they able to transport it by themselves? If that's physically an option, I want them doing it. So in those types of instances, I will have specific AAC goals. Otherwise, I'm writing goals for like language. It's a language goal. Now they can utilize any, multimodality is really how they're communicating, and that's how I'm going to write it. And so I'm not going to necessarily write a specific AAC goal for that because I want them utilizing whatever communication modality is available to them at that point. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. I think the question was related to most children who qualify for an IEP is under SLD. So, but they're not getting the AT or AAC evaluation. So specifically to address dyslexia or dysgraphia or dyscalculia.
That is a bit more AT, a little bit less AAC. But I'm gonna refer you back to those 2 resources that I send out for you, because I think you're gonna find if you go in there and start highlighting, you're gonna find some pretty good information on why that needs to be happening. Because there's no reason why these kids need to be struggling if they don't need to be. There's too many tools out there that their life doesn't need to be that hard. So I'm going to refer you back to those 2 resources that I shared with you, the myths and and the Illinois AT guidance manual. Okay. Okay, it looks like we've got a few more questions in here. When do you decide to do core vocabulary versus functional vocabulary? Eat, drink, help, iPad, etc. Okay, so Erica, I think what you're asking is core vocabulary versus functional vocabulary. What you're listing is actually a combination of core vocabulary with a little bit of fringe. So core vocabulary is actually eat, drink, help. Those are all core words. iPad is a fringe vocabulary. And so if that's something that's really motivating, meaningful, I'm absolutely going to have it in there. So I actually would be offering all of that. And so you can kind of look at the first 50 core words. There's lists out there, just type in first 50 core word vocabulary into Google. You'll get lovely little lists. And you can really focus on those first 50. And then once they are starting to get, like half of them or so, you start introducing, and because you're always trying to teach, right? So then you certainly start adding more and more as they're going along there. But look up those first 50. But absolutely, it's appropriate and encouraged to include fringe vocabulary. It's also called personal vocabulary. So having like names of pets, names of siblings, their name, all that, favorite places, that kind of stuff. That's just what makes it, you're just going to get buy-in and add in those customizations to make it meaningful for them. So certainly incorporating both of them. Okay. Maria, in your research, what do you suggest if the household speaks another language other than English? Should the AAC device have bilingual words? Yes, yes, it should. Absolutely. There's a bunch of research out there that shows that introducing more than one language does not inhibit the development of another language. In fact, these kiddos have a tendency to increase their overall cognition by learning both. I mean, you look at the amount of research out there on bilingualism. My husband speaks over 6 languages, and he's a very intelligent man. We're learning more than one language. You're just so good for the brain. And it's no exception for AAC users. There's been a ton of development in the AAC world with options that are really promoting and making it easier for bilingual users. So certainly when you're looking at an AAC system, you're going to want to look at that as part of your feature matching process. So as we start that AAC evaluation process, that's one of the things you're going to be looking at is how easy can you toggle back and forth between English and, is it just saying bilingual? So Spanish or whatever other language you might be utilizing. Keeping in mind, some languages are definitely easier to access than others. So Spanish is obviously going to be one of your easiest. French is pretty easy. I have run into some challenges with some of the other languages. Ukrainian Russian was one that I'm still riding the struggle bus on, trying to find a really good translation. So if you do go that route, just make sure that if it is a less common language in the US, you have a native language speaker listen to your AAC system to make sure that it's actually making sense. Because I have run into that where it was a AAC system that said that they had it and the family was like, that's not Russian. So just kind of keep that in mind. That's my tip for the day. But yes, absolutely. If you can offer it, please do so. Educate the family that that is an option. Encourage it, support it, let them know that that is something that will only benefit their student. Okay. Anything else?
There are a couple questions in the chat
Okay.
or the Q&A. So one is just how can a college student be taught to use an ACA, or is it, yeah, ACA device is what they typed.
Assuming AAC device, how can I call it? Yeah. The process is really going to be the same, regardless of age. So I mean, I've worked with individuals as young as I don't know, 2.5, and oldest was in her 70s. So the process is really very similar. So you're going to be doing that modeling piece, modeling them and showing them how to use it. Allowing them time to explore the device and figure it out. And I think that's another really critical piece. Sometimes we look at our AAC users and we're wondering, why are they stimming on it? It's called exploring. We need to give our AAC users that time and that freedom to be able to explore and make mistakes. Allow that to happen. Know that that is part of the process. We make mistakes and somehow we don't allow our AAC users the same privilege. So give them some explicit instruction. And the other thing I would say is allow them to have as much say in the process as possible. Because if this is the first time that they are really coming across a device, they just statistically are more inclined to abandon the device because of their age. Because they have not been exposed to it from a young age, they're more likely to abandon it. And so really what you want to do is have all buy-in possible. So you're going to be approaching this individual and be like, hey, you're going to be part of this AAC evaluation process. Your opinion matters more than anybody else. I am here as somebody to provide you options and you will be making this decision. Okay. I will have them choose which voice they're going to have, choose the layout, the color, anything and everything that they can have a say in, they're going to have a say in because that's how you're going to get that buy-in from that individual. And once you have that buy-in, you work on the training piece of it with that modeling, with that explicit instruction, and away you go, continuing to problem solve as issues arise. But that's really what you're going to be starting with. Start with that buy-in, and then from there go to modeling and explicit instruction. And then that time to just play around and explore, and that ability to make mistakes so that they can figure it out.
The last one, I think it's maybe more of a statement than a question. It says, my younger son will use my son's device to talk. That is okay. That is one takeaway I have.
Yes. Not only is that okay, I would encourage that. Like, that is like, I love getting siblings involved. Love it, because it's going to increase that social acceptance of that device. And it's a model from a kiddo that's closer in age, so that AAC user is more inclined to accept that AAC model. I love having peers and siblings involved so much. And a lot of times in the classrooms that I'm working in, I'll encourage a teacher to, like a lot of teachers have like those job lists in their classroom of like, you're the light helper, you're the door opener or whatever. Like I will have like the AAC modeler like on that board as like they get to rotate through and they get to be the AAC modeler for the week or the day or whatever. Because it makes or breaks the success of the system if they are able to get that social acceptance from their peers and their siblings. So I love that. Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, I think that was the last question. So I appreciate you staying on late.
Yeah, absolutely.
Later.
So you guys have my email. I mean, it's in the handouts. So anything else pops up, let me know. Otherwise, thank you for joining. It was great having a conversation with you guys, and hopefully you walked away with a few tips and tricks.
Yeah, and this will be archived on our website. We'll get that on by the end of the week, probably tomorrow. And so, yeah, just look for that recording, and then I will send out an email with the handouts and different resources that were provided today as well.
Perfect. Thank you
If
so
you have
much.
any questions, definitely reach out to Amanda or myself. Thank you. Have a good day.